You know what's cool? Space. Space is cool. In May of 2023, I visited and covered Kennedy Space Center, which sees around 1.5 million visitors annually. While not coming anywhere near close to theme park numbers in Florida, it's still a remarkably popular tourist destination and really blurs the line between museum and theme park. It's full of themed exhibits, real artifacts of the American space program, and a good handful of complex and well-executed shows fit for an actual theme park. Even as recent as June of 2022, Kennedy Space Center opened a new building and exhibit known as Gateway: The Deep Space Launch Complex, which focuses on the future of space travel and even contains simulators with different films. So that's kind of like having rides. Kennedy Space Center is a fascinating place that could loosely be described as a space-themed theme park, though unexpectedly, the video generated a lot less interest than I anticipated. I was a bit surprised because space as a theme is actually quite prevalent and popular in the themed world. As far back as 1901, it appears that the idea of space travel was quite popular, with the premiere of A Trip to the Moon, which was some type of early dark ride that premiered at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. Fast forward to the opening of Disneyland in 1955, and Tomorrowland was anchored by a show, Rocket to the Moon, where park guests would sit in a theater designed to look like a rocket and simulating the trip. From there, space as a theme has been quite popular, whether it be Space Mountain or the subsequent rip-offs that premiered in parks throughout Europe, or weirdly, even Cedar Point with Disaster Transport. Space was embraced by Disney in other ways, ranging from the Brava Centauri scenes in Horizons, a space colony of the future, or the Space Pavilion concept, which evolved into the intense astronaut training of Mission Space. I think it's clear that space travel and exploration makes for an interesting themed experience, but unlike the museum-like aspect of Kennedy Space Center, what if there was an actual space-themed park? Well, thanks to a suggestion from a channel viewer, Quirt Zelope, it appears that there actually was a briefly lived indoor park, one which only lasted for less than a year before shutting down due to massive amounts of debt. It's a short but notable story, so go ahead and hit that like button, and let's take a quick look at the exciting rise and fall of Space Park Bremen. Throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the theme park industry in Europe grew at a steady pace, and while there were many unique attractions and parks, much of it was very much inspired by Disney. In fact, I would even claim that a lot of it was a blatant ripoff of what you could find in their parks. However, as themed entertainment became a larger and larger part of Western culture by the 90s, a lot of new ambitious projects began to be conceptualized, helped of course with the 1992 opening of Euro Disney just right outside of Paris. In the early part of this decade, the German city-state of Bremen was experiencing an economic decline. Located on the Weser River, which leads out into the North Sea, it's a major industrial hub and one of the largest port cities in Germany. However, as it experienced economic trouble, a new idea was proposed by nuclear physicist Wolfgang Wilke for a space-themed entertainment center that would include features such as a domed theater that would show informative films about space exploration, as well as a space camp that apparently taught visitors about astronaut training. The theme made sense as Bremen is home to many firms involved in the German aerospace industry, and partnering with real estate developer Coleman AG, the project was planned to be built on the defunct site of AG Weser, which was a former shipbuilding yard that was abandoned when the company went under in 1983. Looking to revive the industrial district it was located in, the space park was pitched to Bremen in 1994 with the idea that it would bring in tourists, which would be an important step in changing the local economy. This wasn't the only project being conceptualized at the time, as Coleman AG had also proposed another waterfront park for Bremerhaven, which would have been known as Ocean Park, also taking over a former industrial site on the river. It was to be located next to and integrated in with the German Maritime Museum, the Alfred Wegener Institute, which is a research center, and the Bremerhaven Zoo that primarily features aquatic animals. Ocean Park would have included a retail center, ocean-themed entertainment, a hotel, and bus transportation to the space park, although due to local resistance and a lack of investors, it obviously never came to be. Returning to the space park, by 1995, the proposed idea had not acquired any investors, and over the next few years, the project would be discussed with Bremen, evolving to contain a retail center. While the state initially hesitated due to the cost and questions on the viability of the park, there was pressure to open it before Expo 2000, a World's Fair that would bring in a lot of tourism. While it missed the Expo, the park was approved for construction in May of 1999, beginning construction with investors that included Dresdner Bank and public funds from Bremen. The park began construction in June of 2000, though it soon encountered trouble as Coleman AG pulled out due to financial trouble, and Dresdner Bank had to take over construction and most of the financial commitment, with costs ballooning to 500 million euros. The attached mall also had severe issues, as it had managed to snag the department store Kaufhof as an anchor tenant, only to have them pull out as they experienced major financial trouble as well. While attempting to open in 2002, Space Park Bremen was delayed until a soft opening phase in December of 2003, officially opening in February of 2004, and the 120-store retail center never opened, as without an anchor, it couldn't find a single tenant. Still, through a lot of financial trouble and a decade of complications from the original pitch, Germany's first all-indoor theme park miraculously managed to open with a small handful of unique and interesting space and science fiction themed attractions. As visitors entered Space Park Bremen, which was notably shaped like a spaceship, they would purchase tickets in the lobby and move under a large prop of rocket boosters modeled after Saturn IV. From here, they would enter into a long corridor that would allow them to explore the 60,000 square foot facility, which included a small handful of exhibits on space travel. One of these, Mission Control, was considered an attraction and developed with help from the European Aeronautic Defense and Space Company, better known today as Airbus. Mission Control was really nothing more than panels and mounted television screens showing clips of rocket launches, and I do wonder how much of this was inspired by the show at Kennedy Space Center that recreates the Apollo 8 launch. It's certainly not as interesting, though it reportedly let you track the International Space Station and aired a rocket launch from the Ariane program. However, this exhibit then led into the IMAX Space Center Theater, showing the 2002 documentary Space Station, narrated by Tom Cruise. Returning back to the main corridor of Space Park Bremen, it was home to meetable costumed characters like astronauts, and if you made your way to the hub, you would find a restaurant, Bistro 3000, and a large display known as the Cosmosphere. On the hour, every hour, projections and lasers on the sphere would sync with music to create an epic, abstract show, or at least something that probably looked decent for 2004. From here in the hub, you could enter through portals into the other zones, which included an area known as Moonbase 1, taking visitors through a moonrock corridor featuring a spacesuit and photos of astronauts from the Apollo missions. Moving forward, you move into another hallway which I believe is meant to be on a moon base, which then lets you out into another hub that includes a few themed attractions. Included here is a children's playground called Moonscape, and a theater which was known as Destination Moon, showing a film, Earthrise, which was an aesthetic journey along the surface of the moon. The most exciting element of Moonbase 1 was Galaxy Express, a coaster manufactured by Mach that might very well be the first attempt at augmented reality on a coaster. It appears that riders would sit down and have a cumbersome visor lowered over their heads, which started the experience with a CGI recreation of Moonbase 1. As the coaster moved, your vehicle got a glimpse of Earth before traveling through a wormhole to Mars, where you then travel to the surface and fly over a facility on the planet. You then travel through another wormhole to an asteroid belt with a mining operation, then flying past Jupiter and into the rings of Saturn. Jumping into another wormhole, you pop out by the sun, avoiding solar flares, and finally then travel back to Moonbase 1, landing on a runway as the coaster returns to the station. It's not terribly impressive by today's standards, but I'm sure the novelty was remarkable for its time. The final attraction in this area was Robot Rescue, which had riders board a lunar vehicle equipped with a laser blaster. As they traveled through the moon base, they would have to take out robots infected by a virus, and while the ride seemed interesting, there doesn't seem to be anything other than a small handful of surviving photos to judge it by. Leaving Moonbase 1 and returning to the hub, you could go through another portal and find the park's other dark ride. Called Planet Quest, riders were handed 3D glasses and boarded what I believe was an Omnimover, where they traveled past various screen-based scenes on alien planets. The journey seems a bit unfocused and random, though the 3D effect was reportedly very good for its time. Another interesting element of Space Park Bremen was its licensed attractions, with one portal leading into Stargate SG-3000, which first began with a pre-show segment. From here, riders would enter one of 3 moving theaters, which seated 35 guests each. I know nothing about Stargate, so forgive me for not understanding the context, but the riders appear to be Stargate team members who are guided by the stored consciousness of George S. Hammond, traveling through a Stargate to fight Satra, a character that is apparently original to this attraction. Stargate SG-3000 was later brought to Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom, Six Flags Great America, and Six Flags Marine World, but all versions were apparently gone by 2006. Moving on, the final indoor and licensed attraction was Star Trek Borg Encounter. If you've watched my video on themed entertainment in the 90s, then you might recall how I mentioned Star Trek The Experience at the Las Vegas Hilton, which was an elaborate and immersive walkthrough and simulator hybrid. However, in 2004, another experience was added known as Borg Invasion 4D, which started with a live pre-show in a Starfleet space station as costume characters that played Borg invaded and took over. Visitors were then rushed into a ship, which was just a 4D theater, where they encountered the Borg as they tried to escape. Once inside the cube, riders encounter the Borg Queen, although an escape is executed by the Doctor from the space station. However, just as it seems that the plan is going to fail, the USS Voyager blasts its way in, towing everyone to safety as the cube explodes. While certainly interesting, and there's definitely more to it than I just summarized, it wasn't as high budget or immersive as the Klingon encounter. However, I'm surprised to have seen it cloned to Space Park Bremen, which by most accounts seems to have been exactly the same, and included walk-around Borg characters right outside of the attraction. It may not have been as exciting as the Klingon encounter, but it was definitely considered the park's largest e-ticket attraction. It was pretty impressive compared to just about anything else in Germany at the time. While the offerings inside of Space Park Bremen were pretty strong for a novelty theme park, it is also worth noting that soon after opening, a small selection of flat rides for children were added right outside. However, these all laid in the shadow of the park's most iconic attraction, Space Shot, produced by S&S. Launching riders up the 213-foot tall tower in 2 seconds, this thrilling ride was notable for being dressed as a support tower of a large Ariane 4 rocket prop, which is certainly a unique bit of theming. Admittedly, S&S space shots are actually a bit underwhelming, but I think that this is certainly an icon that made the park seem quite exciting to visitors, not that there were really ever many. When the park opened, the expectation was that it would receive 1.5 million visitors within its first year, but only ever saw around 350,000. In fact, the park didn't even make it a full year, closing in September after only a mere 7 months. So why did it fail, and why did the park declare bankruptcy? Well, the park itself was in massive debt on opening, and failed to see the expected visitation because it cost €22, or about $28 per person, which didn't seem worth the cost for the low number of attractions available. In my opinion, I think that price actually seems more than reasonable for the quality of the attractions, but apparently Germans didn't feel the same way. The park was also difficult to get to, as public transportation didn't directly go to the site, which meant it was only really accessible by car. This limited the number of people across Germany who would have bothered to drive for over an hour to visit such a small park. Even then, it was reported that the park itself had very little advertisement, and the peak of its exposure was when it closed, where people were surprised to even learn of its existence. If the park had managed to open with its mall, I think that it could have existed for quite a while, because that would have certainly attracted people, yet I find it remarkable that they couldn't find a single tenant. So, while the idea of Space Center Bremen was pretty solid conceptually and was executed well, it does seem to have been doomed from the start from the perfect combination of factors that worked against it. After its closure, the property was bought and sold a few times, with the retail center becoming Waterfront Bremen, opening in 2008 as a successful mall, and even reusing the IMAX theater. Still, elements of Space Park Bremen appear to have been sold off, with the rocket sold to a Dutch entrepreneur, Galaxy Quest being rebuilt in another German park, Tanis Wonderland, and the ride vehicles from Planet Quest appearing in a science center in Kuala Lumpur, taking riders through a brief history of a developing Malaysia. While the idea and attractions of Space Park Bremen were really interesting, I do think that even if all the right factors had been in place to allow it to be a success, it ultimately wouldn't have really lasted more than a decade just due to its limited size. Had it existed for longer, I believe that many people would have viewed it as a one-and-done type of experience, limping on only because of the connected mall, which, now that it's open, has proven to be quite popular. So this was the story of an obscure, short-lived, and ultimately bankrupt indoor theme park, one that I thought might be interesting to look into just because it's so different from anything else. And really, this video wouldn't have happened without Quert Zalopi suggesting the idea and giving me a place to start my research. So if you made it all the way here to the end and have not yet left a like, doing so really helps the video reach a wider audience. As always, if you have not yet subscribed and hit the bell notification yet either, you can do so now to be alerted to new videos as they release.